I'm 34, and until recently, I was in what I thought was an amazing relationship with my 41-year-old girlfriend. We were together for just over a year, and everything seemed perfect, until it all fell apart. This situation is really complicated for me, something I've never dealt with before, so let me give some context before diving into my "am I the donkey" moment. We met at a concert last year, and sparks flew immediately. She had been married for 10 years and had 2 kids, but when we met, she had already been separated for 8 months. Since she lived 2 hours away, it quickly became a long-distance relationship. After that first night, we stayed in constant communication, texting all day and talking on the phone every evening. Those conversations were some of the most loving and supportive I'd ever had, making me feel more emotionally connected than I ever had in my past relationships. At first, we didn't rush into anything official, we were just enjoying the connection and getting to know each other. She would visit on weekends, and over time, we fell deeply in love. The physical chemistry was incredible, too, and it felt like we had a unique bond. One thing I found interesting was that she identifies as queer/bi. It wasn't something I'd encountered before in a serious partner, but it wasn't an issue for me. The fact that she'd been in a monogamous marriage with a man for a decade did make it intriguing, though. As things got more serious, I realized I needed to set some boundaries to protect myself. I've dealt with legal headaches before, and I wasn't about to put myself in a risky situation. Since she was still technically married, I did some research and found out that state laws require couples to be separated for at least a year, and living at separate addresses, before filing for a no-fault divorce. Here's where things got complicated. She had told her husband she wanted to separate 8 months before we met, and a month before we met, he bought a house just 2 doors down so they could co-parent more easily. My boundaries were simple but firm. I wouldn't allow myself to be known to her husband or kids until the divorce was finalized, and I made it clear I wouldn't take on any financial responsibilities for the kids. She respected these boundaries, though she sometimes said I was overthinking things. Maybe I was, but I wasn't willing to take any chances. This setup meant she usually came to visit me, and I only visited her place a few times, always when her husband and kids were out of town. The distance didn't bother me, I just wanted to stay cautious and protect myself. Despite the complexities, the relationship was incredible. She supported my career and hobbies, even though they often put me in social situations surrounded by other people. Our connection, both emotionally and physically, felt like nothing I'd ever experienced before. She had a tough year, dealing with her divorce, losing her dog, the death of her mom, and the financial stress of returning to work while managing her kids. Even with all that going on, she never asked me for money or put any pressure on me, which I appreciated. It felt like a genuine partnership between 2 adults who cared deeply for each other. Even with the long distance, it felt like a dream relationship. We didn't argue over petty things or get bogged down by societal expectations. It was just 2 people in love, making it work despite the challenges. At least, that's what I thought. Things started to feel off recently. I had a comedy show booked in New York for an upcoming weekend, and I asked her if she wanted to come along. She said she'd love to, but her co-parenting schedule meant she needed to be with her kids that weekend. I completely understood. I've always respected how dedicated she is to her kids. Honestly, I'm much more attracted to a woman who prioritizes her children over someone who isn't present in their lives. She frequently shared Instagram posts of bands playing at a local venue she loved, and we'd often talk about going there together someday if the right band lined up with our schedules. The Monday before my New York trip, she sent me a post with a lineup of bands she was excited to see later that week. She said weeknight shows were usually hard for her to make, but she always tried if it was a band she really wanted to see. Knowing I wouldn't see her for a month because of her changing schedule, I decided to surprise her by driving to the show after work. I asked if any friends were going with her, but she said she didn't have many friends into that kind of music. She had invited one friend last minute, but they couldn't make it. She joked that she'd just bring her knitting stuff and hang out in the back. On the phone that evening, as I was driving to surprise her, I said, "It sucks you have to go alone. I wish I could be there with you one day." I felt pretty excited, imagining how surprised and happy she'd be when I showed up. Well, the surprise didn't quite go as planned. I thought she'd already be inside when I arrived, but as I drove by the venue looking for parking, we locked eyes. She was just leaving her car. My cover was blown, and all I could think was, damn it, so much for the big surprise. She looked startled at first but then smiled. When I parked and walked over, we hugged and kissed, and she seemed genuinely happy I was there. We walked into the venue together, and as we scanned our tickets, she introduced me to the door clerk, someone she apparently knew. "But here's where things got weird," she said, "this is my friend." I froze for a second. Friend? After a year of dating, I was being introduced as her friend? In my head, I'm thinking, wait a second, I call you my girlfriend to everyone I know. Why am I just your friend? We sat down, and I asked her if the door clerk knew her ex-husband. In my mind, that was the only possible explanation for downplaying our relationship. Maybe she was trying to keep things discreet. Before I could finish my sentence, she corrected me and said, "They." I was confused. What? The door clerk uses they-them pronouns, she clarified. "Okay," I said, "we can talk about that later. But why didn't you introduce me as your boyfriend?" She replied that she still wasn't comfortable using that term and was still getting used to the idea of a serious relationship after her divorce. It felt like a punch to the gut. I'd driven all that way to surprise her, and this was the thanks I got. It made me feel undervalued, and the rest of the night just felt off. Originally, I had asked if I could spend the night with her that Sunday and leave Monday morning for work. She'd said her schedule wouldn't allow it. But midweek, she texted me, saying, "Babe, I've been thinking about you and this weekend a lot. Do you want to come over Saturday after your show and spend the night into Sunday? I have to work Monday, but we could also meet halfway. Thoughts?" Since it would be the last time we'd see each other for a while, I agreed to head to her place after my show. That night, she started sending me nudes and flirty texts about how excited she was to see me. She did that a lot when she was in the mood, and honestly, it was one of my favorite things about her. I couldn't wait to see her. I arrived Saturday night, and we had an amazing time together. The passion was still there, and everything seemed perfect. We went to bed happy and woke up to a cozy breakfast the next morning. But things started to shift later in the day. We went to a cafe, and she suddenly became moody, nitpicking the way I used certain words. She said, "You use words like always and never, which are very absolute and leave no room for nuance. Those are red flags." That threw me off completely. I tend to use hyperbole in casual conversation. It's part of my humor and something I often do in my stand-up routines. It was also the first time she'd ever used the term red flag with me, which made it sting even more. I tried to explain myself and brush it off, thinking it might just be a mood swing since she mentioned her period was about to start. Still, it left me feeling uneasy. We decided to go for a hike, and as we walked, she said, "Hey, I wanted to talk to you about something." My stomach immediately dropped. Those words never lead to anything good. We found a bench to sit on, and I was already bracing myself. She seemed nervous, placing her hand on my leg before starting with, "I just want to start by saying that I love you." At that moment, I couldn't help but interrupt with a half-serious, half-joking comment, "Oh, Jesus, am I getting fired?" It was a reflex. Her tone and the infamous knee pat made me predict this wasn't going to end well. We both laughed, but deep down, I was anxious. She went on to say she wanted to open our relationship to something called a QPR, queer platonic relationship, and possibly polyamory. As she spoke, my mind started shutting down. I knew, deep in my gut, that this was the end of us. Sitting on that bench, I felt a wave of heartbreak and betrayal wash over me. I stayed quiet, letting her finish what she had to say. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't have the words at first. I was processing everything, but the first thing that came out was, this was planned. She blinked, caught off guard. What? I explained, we weren't even supposed to see each other this weekend, but suddenly the plan changed, and now we're on a hike, away from everyone. You clearly set this up to talk about this. What happened? What triggered this? She admitted that she had developed a deep emotional connection with a friend and wanted to pursue this QPR. I had no idea what that even meant, so I asked her to explain. She told me it's a platonic relationship between two people with emotional intimacy but no sexual component. She assured me I would still be her primary partner, and even referred to me as her emergency contact. I pressed further, asking, does this involve a sexual relationship? She said no. Does it involve kissing? Again, she said no. So, what does it involve? She explained it would include romantic gestures like dates, hand-holding, and sharing a deep emotional bond. I was quiet for a moment, then asked, who is the guy? Her response floored me, that's none of your business. I felt disrespected and angry. Out of frustration, I probed further. I remembered there was a guy, let's call him Josh, whom she once mentioned kissing before we met. I asked, okay, without revealing his name, have you kissed this person before? She looked furious, her tone sharp. Why does that matter? It matters, I said firmly, because if you've already been physically intimate with him, how am I supposed to trust that this will remain purely platonic? She got defensive and started accusing me of not being supportive of her identity. I can't believe you're not okay with me exploring who I am as a queer person. I thought you were open-minded, she said. At that point, I directly asked her, have you already cheated on me with Josh? Her response was quick and dismissive, no, he's married. She kept pushing the idea of us taking a break to think about it, but I was resistant. I knew what taking a break usually meant. She had told me before that she slept with someone during a break with her not-yet ex-husband. At one point, she said something that truly stung, if the roles were reversed and you wanted an open relationship, I would support you. I knew this was a lie. Early in our relationship, she admitted to getting jealous over a dream she had where I was with another woman. I took a deep breath and said, look, I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, but I'm not interested in sharing you with other men. I consider your body sacred and exclusive to me. If that's not what you want, we should break up. I'm not going to compromise on this. Her reaction was defensive. She called my response gross, heterosexual, and caveman-like, because I mentioned not wanting to share her body. I calmly replied, you don't have to agree with my values, but those are mine. As we walked back to the car, the tension was thick. Once we got in, we kept talking. I told her that despite everything, I was willing to have an open conversation about finding a middle ground. I admitted I wasn't familiar with all the terminology she had thrown around, and I wanted to understand her perspective before making a final decision. I even suggested creating a clear agreement, an actual contract, so that everyone involved would be on the same page. But she wasn't receptive. She kept shutting me down, insisting that I was unsupportive of her and who she was becoming. The car ride back to her place was heavy, quiet, tense, and filled with a sadness I can only describe as hushed and grim. It felt like a nuclear bomb had gone off in my chest, leaving only silence in its wake. When we got back to the house, she said, I need to go lay down. I'm feeling awful. You can come cuddle with me, but I'm not in the mood for sex. I responded, yeah, me neither, and I could have guessed that. I'll be up in a bit. I stayed downstairs for a while, sitting on the couch and Googling all the terms she had thrown at me earlier, QPR, polyamory, and everything else. I wanted to understand, but the more I read, the less it all made sense to me. Maybe I was ignorant, but the whole concept felt confusing and out of sync with what I thought our relationship was. Eventually, I went upstairs to join her. She was lying under the covers, crying, with her hand pressed against her forehead. She told me she felt terrible and that this weekend wasn't supposed to go this way. She said she needed time to process everything and just wanted to spend the rest of the night with her kids when they got back. Then she asked me to leave. I wasn't surprised, I had already prepared myself for this moment. Before I left, one of the last things she said to me cut deep. "It really hurt when you said, 'I'm not your husband,' during our argument. At least my husband supports me and my choices." It felt like the ultimate slap in the face. So now, not only was I ranked below her QPR guy, but I was apparently also less supportive than her ex-husband, the same guy she separated from in the first place. I grabbed my things, walked over to her, and hugged her one last time. "I love you," I said, and then I left. As I drove away, I passed her ex-husband sitting on the porch 2 doors down. We didn't quite lock eyes, but we noticed each other. All I could think was, "Man, I tried so hard to avoid you this whole time, but in the end, she played both of us. Maybe we have more in common than I realized." When I got home, I tried to distract myself by meeting up with friends for dinner. I needed some comfort, some sense of normalcy. While I was out, I noticed I had missed calls and texts from her. She thanked me for giving her the space to process and called to check if I made it home safely. I replied simply, "Home safe. Thanks." We hadn't officially agreed on a break yet, but it felt like the breakup was already in motion. The next day, I began organizing my thoughts and planning how to end things for good. I needed clarity and time to make sure I was certain about my decision. It felt sudden, like everything had changed overnight, but deep down, I knew this wasn't something I could accept. Later, we talked on the phone, and I asked how she was feeling. She said she felt awful, but she was avoidant, claiming she was too tired to talk. She told me she had to get up early for the gym, which I knew was her way of dodging the conversation. I told her I wanted to share my feelings before we hung up, and she reluctantly agreed, warning me she might not have much to say because she was so tired. I began explaining how I felt betrayed, disrespected, and taken for granted. But as soon as I mentioned betrayed, she snapped, suddenly full of energy. "Betrayed? How did I betray you?" she demanded. I reminded her that a few months into our relationship, she had told me she wanted to be exclusive. She called me her soulmate. She told me she loved me, that I was perfect for her. And now, asking to open the relationship was a direct violation of the boundaries we'd agreed on and the monogamous relationship I thought we were in. She cut me off, saying, "I did say I wanted to be exclusive, but things change. I've been queer my entire life, and I don't want to feel locked in. I want to be poly QPR, and I'm upset that you don't support me or my identity." I replied, "I do support you and your identity, but if that's what you want, I can't be in a relationship with you. It's not what I signed up for, and it's disrespectful to my values. We should break up." Her response was cold, "Yeah, I thought we were more or less over yesterday, so let's just call it over." I tried to share my final thoughts, but she interrupted again, saying, "I'm too old for this arguing. I'm hanging up now. Bye." And just like that, she ended the call. I was sitting there, staring at my phone, thinking, what the hell just happened? Then came the final text from her. "I'm not interested in arguing. I'm sorry your feelings are hurt, but people grow and change, that's life. You should look after yourself and know that I love you very much, but I'm not interested in a relationship where I'm not allowed to grow and change. Take care of yourself." I read it, confused and frustrated. Her words felt dismissive, like she was wiping her hands clean of any responsibility. I responded. I'm not interested in arguing either. I wanted to share my feelings of disrespect, heartbreak, betrayal, and being taken for granted. I have no issue with people growing and changing, in fact, I truly believed we were growing and changing together. Clearly, I was wrong. Talking to someone, Josh, behind my back, someone you claim to have a deep emotional connection with, as well as a previous physical connection, is, without a doubt, emotional cheating. For me, this came out of nowhere and so abruptly that I can't help but wonder if you also physically cheated, though I may never know. This is devastating, especially after you said we were exclusive. How would you feel if the roles were reversed? Either way, I get it. It's clear that during our disagreements, you've never been interested in my feelings or boundaries, only your own. I support your choices, but as long as that's the case, I'm not sticking around. Take care of yourself too. Asterisk. Almost immediately, she removed me from all her social media. After that, the first thing I did was schedule a doctor's appointment to make sure I hadn't contracted any STIs or STDs. I knew I'd been faithful, but I wanted the peace of mind that I was still healthy. Later, I started piecing everything together, reflecting on the entire relationship. Was it all an illusion? Was I being played from the start? I remembered that the door clerk at the venue knew Josh, because Josh's band played there. Was that why she introduced me as her friend? Had she and Josh been there together before? She had kissed Josh before, and when we first met, she said she was at the concert alone because Josh had flaked. So, they had initially planned to go to that concert together. She always claimed Josh was married, so there wasn't any sexual relationship, but now I wasn't sure. Once, when she planned to attend one of his shows, I asked, "Isn't it weird to go to a show of someone you've kissed?" She brushed it off, saying, "We're not exes because we never dated, we just kissed. Besides, his girlfriend will be there, so there's nothing to worry about." But now I couldn't help but wonder, was Josh even married? Did he have a girlfriend at all? Was Josh in the background the entire time? She said she'd only started talking to him again recently, but was that true? Had Josh influenced her decision to ask for an open relationship? Was he the one who convinced her to bring up QPR and polyamory? Even the little things started to bother me. She once told me she felt uncomfortable when I surprised her at the concert because she likes her comfort zone and doesn't enjoy surprises. She said her house was messy and that she wanted time to clean before visits. Was that just an excuse to hide something? Am I the asshole for leaving when my girlfriend asked for an open QPR/poly relationship? Or was the entire relationship a mirage that I failed to see through? I'm not looking for closure anymore. I've learned that no one ever gives you the real answers when you ask why. I have no intention of asking her to come back, nor would I ever return if she reached out to me. I'm moving on, and surprisingly, I'm doing okay. That said, my mind can't help but jump around like a cat at 2 a.m., replaying everything. So, feel free to share your thoughts. Do you think she cheated? Was what she did right? Should I have seen the signs earlier? Be honest, even if your answer is harsh, I can take it. This whole experience has taught me a lot about myself, and I plan to use those lessons in my future relationships.